yetu yetu liye mbinguni, yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye jina lako litukuzwe.
Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni, yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye jina lako litukuzwe.
Tuangalie chakula chetu, tunachohitaji utusamehe makosa yetu, hey! Kama sisi tunavyowasamehe usitutie katika majaribu, lakini utuokoe na yule milele na
Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Medina, and this is the life of Christ. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, Matthew 2:1, we have seen how Joseph was forced by the decree of the emperor Augustus Caesar, who had successfully colonized the Holy Land during the time of Jesus' nativity. He was forced by Emperor Augustus, Roman Emperor Augustus, to travel from his home city of Nazareth down to the Jordan Valley along with Mary until they got to Jericho, made a right turn, went up the Kidron Valley, a very steep ascent of 1,000 meters or so, made a left, and went south to Bethlehem so that Jesus could be born. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judah, the land of my tribe, or really clan, the one from which I come. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Now, who was this Herod the king? Herod the king was called Herod the Great. He was really not great at all. The way that you get historians to call you great is to kill a lot of people. Now, this Herod, who had been made the governor general of Judea by the Emperor Augustus, like a good governor general, he wasn't really of the people who he was supposed to govern. He was an Idumean, an Edomite. Now, this map here shows the general area of the promised land. All of this area that's red. This is the land of Judah. This is the land of Israel. Now, possibly in Solomon's time, the kingdom of Israel extended all the way through Syria to the river Euphrates, which isn't really shown on this map, but is over here. Now, Lebanon is in this area here, and it was never part of Israel. It was called Phoenicia in ancient times. Anyway, it's all in this area here. You may remember the friend of King Solomon, Hiram, the king of Tyre. He was living in this area here, and he maintained his independence. But in the times of the Roman Empire, all of this area was overrun by the Romans. And they divided it into three parts. Herod was the tetrarch. That means that there were three rulers in that general area. He was in charge of the area of Jerusalem and Bethlehem, this area over here. But Herod had been imposed on the Jewish people, and now I'm using this correctly. To be a Jew means to come from the tribe of Judah, as I do. The ruler of Judah was supposed to be somebody who was of the house and lineage of David, as Joseph was, and Mary too, for that matter. But Joseph was an IDP. Somehow, Joseph ended up in Nazareth, which was not his ancestral land. And in order to be registered for taxation, he had to go from Nazareth, which was not ruled over by Herod the so-called Great, he had to go to Bethlehem to be registered because the emperor said so. Now, while Joseph was being registered in Bethlehem, the time came for Mary to be delivered of her firstborn son. In Luke 2:6. So it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her, that is Mary, to be delivered. Now, after Matthew 2:1, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, the so-called Great, Herod, because he had been imposed on the Jewish people, was not really popular. So what Herod did in order to increase his popularity was that he ordered an expansion, reconstruction, and beautification of the temple in Jerusalem. He caused to be built a platform that rises from the lower part of the city next to the Kidron Valley. I referred to the Kidron Valley already because the Kidron Valley is a dry valley that may have at one time held a seasonal river, but there's no river there now. It goes down from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, and the Kidron Valley is the traveler's route from Jerusalem down to Jericho. In Jerusalem, Herod, the so-called Great, caused to be built a platform, and on the platform he built or expanded or beautified or renovated the temple. Here's a map of the city of Jerusalem. As you can see, the Kidron Valley over here is going down to the Dead Sea. Now, the city of David here is no longer a part of the present walled city of Jerusalem. The whole walled city has moved northwards because the walls have been knocked down and rebuilt. The present walls date from the 1500s, and they were actually built by a sultan of Turkey. But anyway, when David conquered the citadel of Jabus, it was here in this area, which is outside the walls of today's city of Jerusalem. It's inhabited today by Palestinians, and it's called Silwan. Silwan is another form of the word Siloam in Hebrew. You may remember there was an incident where Jesus healed somebody who had been sick for 18 years by the pool of Siloam. Anyway, the pool of Siloam is below a hill which is today a Palestinian neighborhood called Silwan. The government of Israel has recently begun and is continuing a process of evicting the Palestinians from what was the city of David, the citadel of Jabus, on the hill that is today called Silwan. David expanded the city northwards. First, he built his palace in this area, which is called Ophel. You can see here on the map the royal palace. Then beyond that, to the north, was the precincts of the temple. Remember, David never was allowed by God to build the temple. It was Solomon who did so. Now, there's supposed to be historical continuity between the temple of Solomon and the platform that was built by Herod the so-called Great, the Edomite who was imposed as governor general on the Jews by the Romans. We can't really tell that because archaeology is forbidden under what is today called the Temple Mount. The reason for that is that the Jews didn't like the Roman occupation. So in 67 AD, they rose up in rebellion. This was a little more than 30 years after the death and resurrection of our wonderful Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. They rose up in rebellion against the Roman occupation, and they tried to kick the Romans out. But their Mau Mau rebellion wasn't successful, and it was put down in blood by the Roman occupiers. Jesus had prophesied that in Luke 21 and verse 20. He said, "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near." The Jewish Mau Mau movement began in 67 AD. Jesus had prophesied that it would fail. In verse 21, he gave instruction to his followers. He said, "Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her." For, verse 22, "These are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled." So the Roman armies laid siege to Jerusalem. The temple itself, as it had been built up by Herod the so-called Great, was a fortress. It was built upon a platform. It had high walls. It had walls within the temple itself. This faint line on the map is where the holy place was. Then finally, this place here was the holiest place. But the Romans came in verse 24, and in 70 AD, they successfully conquered Jerusalem and the temple. Every time the Romans breached a wall of Jerusalem, of which there were many concentric walls, the Jews would fall back to another wall. And finally, they ended up holed up in the temple grounds. So the Romans went and they pried apart every wall and every stone of the temple, as had been prophesied by Jesus. And in verse 24 of Luke chapter 21, the Jewish people fell by the edge of the sword. They were led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem itself was trampled by Gentiles, pagans, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. In verse 24, Jesus is speaking in the future tense because those things had not yet happened when he spoke those words, but they did happen. In verse 21, his instruction to the disciples was to flee out of Jerusalem. And this was the beginning of the breach between Judaism and Christianity. Christianity was regarded as a sect of Judaism, a heretical sect, but a sect of Judaism nevertheless. But when Jerusalem was compassed by armies, the partisans, the Jewish Mau Mau, under the leadership of Simeon bar Koseva, hold themselves up in the temple, and the Romans just did what they had to do to get at the Jews under the leadership of Simeon bar Koseva. Simeon is a name. Bar means son of. Koseva is the name of Simeon's father. Now, Simeon bar Koseva was not a Jew. He was not a Judahite. He was not from my clan. Simeon bar Koseva was from the tribe of Benjamin. But a very famous rabbi at that time by the name of Rabbi Akiba declared that Simeon bar Koseva was the Messiah. This was biblically impossible because Simeon bar Koseva was not of the tribe of Judah. He was not of the house and lineage of David. And Rabbi Akiba should have known better. But Rabbi Akiba said that Simeon bar Koseva was the Messiah. And he renamed him Simeon bar Kochba, which means Simeon, the son of the star. Now, when Rabbi Akiba declared Simeon Bar Koseva the Messiah. All the followers of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, the true Messiah, the Christ, they all ran away from Jerusalem because they refused to follow a false Messiah. And this was the beginning of the breach between Judaism and Christianity. After 70 AD, because the followers of Jesus refused to participate in the rebellion against the Roman colonialists, not because they did not consider themselves Jews, but because they refused to follow the false Messiah, Simeon Bar Koseva. They all ran away from Jerusalem to the mountains as Jesus had instructed them prophetically in Luke chapter 21, verse 20. They ran away. After that, they were considered traitors to the Jewish people. Now, when you truly set your heart and mind and soul and strength to follow Jesus, there are those from among your kinfolk who will regard you as a traitor to tribal values, to cultural traditions and superstitions. They will call you what I am considered by some of the surviving remnant of the Jewish people today. In Hebrew, I am called a meshumad by some of them, a traitor, a betrayer. And when you set your heart and mind to follow Jesus completely through his life, which is in you, was in him, and was in you, there are those among your kinfolk who will call you a traitor. But you just keep following Jesus. Your enemy is not the enemy of your kinfolk. Your enemy is the devil. And for this purpose, the Son of God was made manifest, that he might destroy the works of the devil. You follow Jesus, follow his instructions, follow his way, and let the devil take those of your kinfolk who want to follow some other direction. You follow Jesus, and may I follow Jesus too, by the power of the Holy Spirit and the life that is in us. I'm Dr. Mitch Medina, and this is the life of Christ.
Baba yetu yetu liye mbinguni, yetu yetu amina. Baba yetu yetu liye, jina lako litukuzwe.
Baba yetu yetu liye